Police in Bangladesh have arrested 27 men on suspicion of being gay, which is a crime in the country. Bangladesh still has a British colonial-era law on the books that outlaws homosexuality. While this law is rarely enforced, according to the Associated Press, the LGBTQ community faces widespread persecution throughout the country. Members of an elite police force, the Rapid Action Battalion, arrested the suspects during a raid on a community center outside the capital Dhaka on May 19th. Most of the suspects are students in their 20s and 30s. One police official told the AP the men were found with illegal drugs and they would be charged with drug offenses and not homosexuality because they had not yet had sex. However, another official told AFP news agency the men had been arrested for homosexuality without saying what charges they would face. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
CNN has reported that Chelsea Manning posted the first image of herself on Thursday since her release from military prison. Manning wrote on Instagram, "Okay, so here I am, everyone." Manning was convicted in 2013 on 20 charges, including violating the Espionage Act for leaking a massive trove of U.S. documents and video to WikiLeaks. She was found not guilty of aiding the enemy, thereby avoiding a life sentence. Out of prison, Chelsea Manning looks forward to exploring life as a woman. The day after sentencing, Manning came out as transgender. Manning began taking hormones in prison, becoming the first person to do so in military prison. She remained in an all-male Army prison until her release on Wednesday.
On Thursday, a new report by the CDC warns that people visiting public pools should be aware of a parasitic diarrhea-causing infection linked to pools and water playgrounds, which doubled in the U.S. from 2014 to 2016. Michelle Labsa, chief of the CDC's Healthy Swimming Program, wrote in an email, "Cryptosporidium is a germ that can make people sick with diarrhea for up to 3 weeks. In 2016, the CDC discovered 32 outbreaks of Cryptosporidium in swimming pools or water playgrounds in the U.S., compared with just 16 2 years earlier. Symptoms include watery diarrhea, stomach cramps, nausea, and vomiting, possibly leading to dehydration. The CDC stresses the importance of not swallowing pool water and suggests parents take children on more frequent bathroom breaks."
It was supposed to be a day of solidarity. Support protests for 1,600 hunger-striking Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails, refusing food for more than 30 days. But when a young Palestinian was shot dead Thursday by a Jewish settler claiming self-defense, the mood shifted. In scattered incidents throughout the West Bank, Palestinian demonstrators hurled glass and rocks at soldiers who responded with tear gas and stun grenades. With tensions running high in the lead up to the 50th anniversary of Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza and the ongoing prisoner hunger strike, Israeli security services are predicting an uptick in violence in the coming month.
Sources in the Palestinian Authority say that they had hoped to reach a negotiated end to the hunger strike prior to President Trump's visit to the region within the coming days. The same sources say that if the health of any of the hunger strikers deteriorates or worse, the situation here on the streets will escalate substantially. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, in the Israeli-occupied West Bank.
After decades standing sentinel over New Orleans, the Confederate monuments are gone, amid a controversy that at times harkened back to the divisiveness of the Civil War they commemorated. Late Friday, the last of those monuments, a statue of General Robert E. Lee facing defiantly north with his arms crossed, was lifted by a crane from its pedestal. As air was seen between Lee's statue and the pedestal below it, a cheer went out from the crowd who recorded the history with their phones. They shook hands with each other in congratulations. Many in the crowd had waited since morning. Under a 2015 City Council vote on a proposal by Mayor Mitch Landrieu, Lee's was the last of 4 monuments to Confederate-era figures to be removed. The removal of the monuments has drawn praise from those who saw them as brutal reminders of slavery and symbols of the historic oppression of black people.
The Federal Communications Commission has started the process of undoing Obama-era regulations on internet service providers, often called net neutrality rules. On May 18th, the FCC voted 2-1 along party lines on what's known as the Restoring Internet Freedom proposal, which would strip out the existing regulations that govern net neutrality. Net neutrality is the concept that all internet traffic must be treated equally. That means internet providers can't meddle with loading speeds or provide special treatment to apps and websites that pay extra. Opponents of the Obama-era regulations, such as Republicans and broadband providers, accuse the FCC of regulatory overreach and argue that the rules have actually harmed consumers by inhibiting investment in broadband infrastructure. Supporters say the rules are necessary to ensure that internet service providers can't play favorites. For United News International from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Less than a week into his new position as head of state, Macron comes to northern Mali, the center of France's biggest military operation overseas. In a joint press conference with Mali's president, the new head of state calls for a continuation of French military commitment.
France has been committed on your side from the start, and what I've come here to tell you very clearly is that we will continue to be committed in the same way.
Despite 4,000 French troops and 11,000 peacekeepers deployed in the Sahel to fight an insurgency, the situation keeps deteriorating since the 2013 Mali intervention. Now, a UN rapid intervention force is being deployed in central Mali as attacks continue to spread.
Those who have never been confronted with this type of asymmetrical war can go on thinking we are doing nothing just because we are not able to definitely put an end to the wrong.
As a candidate, Macron wanted to break from previous French presidents, seen as meddling in the financial and political affairs of its former colonies. But on this visit, the new president stands in line with his predecessors. The French military presence will continue. Many Malians are disappointed that this visit is taking place hundreds of kilometers away from the capital Bamako, inside a French military base. But they do see in this young French president a possibility to bring new perspectives to an old relationship. Some in Mali and West Africa want to see an end to the CFA, the Central African franc, a common currency shared for the past 72 years by 12 former French colonies. To this day, the CFA is still controlled from Paris.
We have to get rid of it. It doesn't really belong to us. It's guaranteed by another country, France, our former colonizer.
Billions of dollars in foreign reserves belonging to former African colonies are managed by France's central bank. It prints the bills in Europe, away from the African continent. In this visit, Macron has promised to offer more military support and development money. As for the CFA, for now, he says, it's up to African states to decide. Nicholas Hawk, Al Jazeera, Bamako.
You can buy candy and soda and vending machines, and now you can even buy a Bentley. In December, Audubon Motors built a giant 15-story vending machine for luxury vehicles in Singapore. Similar approaches have been used in urban parking lots around the world, but this tower dispenses models like Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Porsche, and even a few classics from the 60s and 70s. If it looks like something from a toy store, well, it is. Gary Hong, general manager of Audubon Motors, told CNN Money a Matchbox toy car display inspired him when he was at Toys R Us with his son. He also said, quote, "We needed to meet our requirement of storing a lot of cars. At the same time, we wanted to be creative and innovative." The tower can hold 60 vehicles that deep-pocketed customers can buy at the touch of a tablet button. For United News International, I'm Kimberly Caldwell.
Researchers at a children's hospital in the city of Boston have reportedly developed a wearable device that can predict seasonal flu outbreaks faster than current methods. According to the researchers, the device, which is called the Thermia online health educational tool, works as a standalone digital application or can receive a child's temperature directly through an eye thermometer, a FDA-approved patch-like thermometer. In a statement, researchers go on to say that they tested the device in China, where the eye thermometer's manufacturer is located.
A new ferry that will connect North Korea and Russia has made its inaugural voyage. On May 18th, a ferry called Mongyongbong docked at the Russian port of Vladivostok. It's scheduled to make weekly trips between Vladivostok and the port of Rajin in North Korea. Russia's TASS news agency reports the Mongyongbong can carry some 200 passengers and 1,500 metric tons of cargo. It was built over 45 years ago, but just updated last year. Both cargo and tourists are expected to come mostly from China, being taken to and from Russia via North Korea. The new venture is setting sail at a time of political unrest on the Korean Peninsula, as the world community has been condemning North Korea's pursuit of ballistic and nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Reuters reports that a Russian foreign ministry spokesperson said the new service has nothing to do with political issues, saying she, quote, didn't see a connection. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
According to an article published on the Science magazine website, chemists are zeroing in on the chemical reactions that first triggered the beginning of life. Researchers believe that life on Earth began with RNA molecules, which serve as catalysts which speed up biochemical reactions, but have struggled for decades to explain how the molecules' 4 building blocks could have arisen from the simpler compounds present on our planet's early days. Now, however, chemists have identified simple reactions that, using the raw materials that are present only on Earth, can synthesize close cousins of all 4 primal building blocks, suggesting that scientists may be closing in on a plausible scenario for how all biological life began on Earth.
2 Chinese fighter jets reportedly intercepted an American plane over the East China Sea. U.S. officials said that a WC-135 Constant Phoenix aircraft was conducting a routine mission in international airspace on May 17th when 2 Su-30 fighter jets intercepted it, coming within 150 feet of the U.S. plane. One of the Su-30s reportedly flew inverted or upside down directly above the American plane. U.S. officials described the encounter as unprofessional. The WC-135, which is commonly referred to as a sniffer, is designed to collect information on radiation in the atmosphere to detect nuclear activity. Both China and the U.S. have been in talks about ways to curb the development of nuclear weapons by North Korea, which is in the vicinity of where the intercept occurred. For United News International from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum. The U.S. Navy is reportedly moving another aircraft carrier towards the Korean Peninsula amid heightened tensions with North Korea. The USS Ronald Reagan departed from Japan on May 16th after completing a maintenance period and sea trials. The $8.5 billion carrier joins her sister ship, the USS Carl Vinson, in the region, providing a heightened American military presence in an area racked by tensions with North Korea. The deployment comes just days after Pyongyang claimed to have successfully test-fired a missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead that can reach U.S. targets. Defense officials have not said how long the U.S. plans to operate 2 carriers near North Korea. But ultimately, the Reagan is expected to replace the Vinson in the region once its deployment ends. For United News International from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Anti-government protesters out in force in Caracas once again. This time, marching against what they say is police violence. More than 40 people have died in the month and a half since protests began. Here, stones and tear gas filled the air again. Their complaints: a lack of basic goods, endemic crime, and an increasingly authoritarian government. On Thursday, US President Donald Trump weighed in.
It is a very, very horrible problem, and from a humanitarian standpoint, it is like nothing we've seen in quite a long time.
The US Treasury announced sanctions against 8 judges in the Venezuelan Supreme Court who had accused of damaging the country's democracy. The US has tried to sanction individual Venezuelan officials before, and it hasn't really worked out that well. In the past, it's enabled the Venezuelan government to justify its oft-repeated line that the protests and the opposition in general are just part of a US-backed plot. But while those attempts by the US might be misguided, they are part of an overall increasing concern from the international community over, amongst other things, the chronic shortages in Venezuela. And you can see that in the bridge that we're at now. People passing from Venezuela behind us to Colombia on the other side, and they're going there looking for basic foodstuffs, medicine that they just can't get at the moment back home. That's fueling general unrest. National Guard reinforcements have had to be sent in to stop looting in the western state of Táchira as Venezuela moves deeper into its drawn-out crisis. John Holman, Al Jazeera, Cúcuta, Colombia.
Our rights now. That's what these protesters are chanting in the Brazilian capital, Brasilia. They're angry at their president's alleged corruption and want him gone.
We are here with social movements and independent parties to give a final push and put pressure on the deputies and Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies to accept the impeachment request that has already been filed, so that this government leaves.
President Michel Temer's government has come under pressure after a newspaper report of a recording implicating the president in a corruption scandal. Global newspaper says police have audio and video evidence that a presidential aide negotiated bribes worth thousands of dollars in return for helping one of the world's largest meat processing firms, JBS, overcome fair trade problems. The report also alleges that an executive from JBS told President Temer how he was paying money to silence a corrupt politician. That politician is Eduardo Cunha, the former Speaker of the lower house. He's now in prison for taking millions of dollars in bribes in another scandal involving the petroleum giant Petrobras. But the newspaper report hasn't been verified and no transcripts have been issued. The presidential palace has denied the accusations in a statement, saying President Michel Temer never solicited payments to obtain the silence of former deputy Eduardo Cunha. But that's done little to stop people from gathering outside the presidential palace.
We came here after accusations that came out now. We already knew, but now there is a video. There is proof that the president committed a crime during his mandate. So these people, like me, when they saw that on the news, they came here spontaneously because they can't take it anymore.
And the opposition has also echoed the popular demands on the street for the president to step down.
Today something happened that, in fact, all of us have been waiting for. Concrete evidence of corruption in the Temer government, but especially of President Temer himself.
Just last year, Temer's predecessor, President Dilma Rousseff, was impeached after a corruption scandal. And now 3 of his government's ministers have been forced to resign, and 8 others are implicated in corruption. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
Saudi Arabia's powerful deputy crown prince was one of the first foreign leaders President Trump welcomed to the White House. Now he'll meet his father, King Salman, as Saudi Arabia becomes the first country to be visited by the new US president. Ties between the two nations go back to the end of the Second World War. On a US warship in the Suez Canal, President Franklin Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz ibn Saud did a deal that has framed the relationship between the two nations. Saudi Arabia would give the US access to its oil, which has fueled the engine that is the US economy. In return, the US provides military hardware and training. Subsequent presidents have met Abdulaziz's 6 successors, all of them his sons, but experts say the relationship has evolved.
So it's less the amount of oil that America gets, and it's more that the impact that Saudi Arabia has as a responsible player, controlling player really, because it was the dominant player in OPEC. And I think that that arrangement has withstood the test of time.
President Trump will continue to offer US military support. It's likely he'll conclude the biggest arms deal in history when he's in Riyadh. In return, he wants Saudi help on the fight against ISIL. The other big priority for the president is restarting peace efforts between the Israelis and Palestinians, and that's why the Saudis have arranged a summit of Arab and Islamic leaders while Trump is visiting. Everyone agrees that a fresh approach could be helpful in solving this long-running conflict, and President Trump certainly brings that. But Arab leaders will want to hear more than optimism. They'll want to know President Trump's plan to move things forward. James Bays, Al Jazeera, Washington.